comes from. Obviously, at the same time, I've never pretended from this podium that NATO is able to stop, or anybody for that matter is able to stop, every armed Serb knocking on every door in any village and looting or intimidating or forcibly evacuating or whatever people inside. It's not possible to do that from the air. What we are saying is that as our air operations evolve, and they are evolving, in the coming hours, coming days, we will be in an increasingly good position to severely disrupt and hinder systematic operations of the VJ and the MUP, the Serb Special Police Forces, against villages, systematic sweep efforts, which have been responsible for the major violence. But I'm not pretending to you, as much as I would like to, but I'm not pretending to you that we are in a situation to prevent every isolated incident of brutality. That can only come when we are in a position to arrive at a peace settlement, which a NATO-led force could then effectively implement on the ground. David, do you want to add to that?
I understand your frustration.
Patricia, please.
Yes, Air Commodore, Patricia Kelly, CNN, can you confirm that 3 Yugoslav MiGs went into Bosnian airspace yesterday? The US aircraft shot down 2, but the third one got away. Can you also confirm that there was reports of another violation of Bosnian airspace today, and tell us what those aircraft were? And can you comment on what, since the pilots haven't been found, and they presumably, if they're still alive, came down in a US-controlled sector which has a Russian brigade in it, what will happen if the Russians pick up the pilots before other S4 troops pick up, in view of the political situation and vis-à-vis Russia and the NATO operation?
Okay, that's quite a long question, Patricia. I'll try and remember my way through it. First of all, in terms of the numbers of aircraft involved, the 2 aircraft came through into our airspace and they were dealt with. At the time, there were reports of perhaps 2 more aircraft, but they didn't cross into our airspace. At one stage, we thought there was a trap being set up to drag our aircraft perhaps into the other airspace. So I have no knowledge of any other aircraft being attacked or shot down. In terms of the aircrew coming down, I'm sure if the aircrew come down into a Russian sector and they are part of S4, they will deal with the prisoners carefully, sensitively, and they will bring them to the authorities very quickly. Today's violation, I have no information at all on that. I will look it up for you, and I'll give you an answer tomorrow.
Well, Patricia, on that, I saw some reports from S4 HQ in Sarajevo earlier today that it could have been helicopters, not planes, that may have came close to the airspace. We're not quite certain. As David says, we're still checking that out. We'll try to give you an update later on. Stephen, please. Excuse me, a microphone a little bit forward, please.
Let me just come back to you. What I can assure you, though, is that we have an extremely effective combat air patrol up, and any incursion will be dealt with very quickly.
Stephen Gray, Sunday Times. I'd just like to go back to the problem of the atrocities in Kosovo at the moment. Could you perhaps just confirm to us what proportion of attacks at the moment are targeted on Kosovo itself? And secondly, how much flexibility is there in your attack plans? Can you confirm, for example, that you will be responding in some way to what's actually happening on the ground, or are you simply just checking off a list?
I would hope we never just check off a list, because flexibility is the key to our power. But as you can see from the numbers of sorties, it is a very complicated business, and we are working to a very well-constructed plan which involves lots of aircraft, lots of people, lots of different nationalities going in it. That does not mean that we are inflexible, and as events evolve, then I think you can look forward to seeing us being far more flexible in our approach.
But at this stage, you're not responding to At this stage, you're not responding to what's happening at the moment. This very major Serb offensive, these atrocities, etc.
No, that's not quite true. We are already beginning to be far more flexible and far more responsive in our operations, and you will see that unfold over the next few days.
Okay, Doug, please.
Doug Hamilton, Reuters. Air Commodore Wilby, you said a moment ago that NATO has no current plans for ground operations. Can you say whether NATO in the coming days has plans for intensive low-level ground attack operations from the air against troops?
Currently, no.
Doug, I think we made it clear yesterday that our aim is to strike at heavy weapons, which of course are what are used to bombard villages and kill people. And that's what we aim to get on with as soon as the first set of targets has been effectively covered. I think Craig Whitney asked for the microphone. Craig, the microphone is on its way.
A follow-up and a second question for Commodore Wilby. You said we have no current plans for ground operations. Does that mean you don't intend to go in on the ground, or that SHAPE has not been asked by the NATO political authorities to produce any plans for eventual ground operations? And the second question is, what are the weather conditions over the target areas today?
I'll answer the easy one first of all. The weather is not very good. The weather is not very good at all over the target area, but that is one of the reasons we invest so heavily in technology, and many of our platforms have got extremely good capabilities despite the weather factor. In terms of ground operations, and I know you'll keep pressing me on this one, and it's not one that we can wriggle out of, but currently there are no plans for us to take offensive ground operations in Kosovo.
Absolutely. The 12,000-odd NATO forces in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia continue to prepare and train for what we hope will be a peacekeeping, peace support operation, hopefully before too long. John Dahlberg, please. Go ahead, John.
Jamie, as you know, the British Defense Secretary this morning spoke of what appears to have been an all-out Serb offensive against Kosovo that he said had just begun. Can you confirm that? Because your language to me in your opening remarks seemed to be a bit more tentative. You spoke of reports rather than confirmed incidents. And I'm wondering if you can speak about a specific incident. Apparently, according to one of my American colleagues, 10 to 15,000 ethnic Albanians may have been rounded up and sent on a forced march by the Serbs. Yep. And I'm wondering what you can tell me about that. Thank you.
John, I've seen those reports, but for the time being, they're reports. We are in the difficult situation, as you know, of not having an international observer presence in Kosovo at the present time, because the OSCE verification mission was withdrawn some days ago. And obviously, the current conditions make it very difficult for those remaining Western or international relief agencies, such as the UNHCR, to operate across the territory. So obviously, I think one has to be somewhat cautious. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, from refugees, from national technical means, from the aid agencies which are still there and which have collected a certain amount of evidence, we do see increasingly convergent reports, which is the reason why I've rung the alarm bell this morning here at this briefing. But as far as the rounding up of I saw a figure of 20,000 Kosovar Albanians, I can't confirm that at the present time. But what we do know from OSCE monitors on the border between Kosovo and Albania for certain is that a large number of Albanians have been literally pushed over the border by Serb paramilitary forces in the last couple of days, and very ominously without any men. And we would really like to be able to explain exactly why that is happening. I don't have a figure, but it's a significant number of people, which suggests that an ethnic cleansing operation is underway. I'm not going to put a figure on it, John. Let's wait. Let's be careful. Let's wait. But at the same time, let's register indications that dark things are happening, even if we're not able to quantify those for the time being. But we will be able to. We will. We'll get the information. We'll get the evidence. And those responsible for any crimes that have been committed will be on the list of the International Tribunal before too long. Christopher.
we clarify a few things about the weather. Sir Charles Guthrie said this morning very clearly that all of the NATO aircraft, not just our own, meaning the British, were called back. And he said that that was because they didn't want to risk hitting civilians and so on, some of what Jamie was suggesting. That's fine, but just as a clarification here, can we get that straight? Were all the NATO Air Force planes called back last night?
Some of the airplanes turned back because of the weather, and it was not just weather in the target area, but weather en route for the various operations that are associated with the mission. But manned aircraft did get through to their targets last night.
And I have one other question about the weather,
Which
is, if you've got 15 to 20,000 people on a forced march, presumably those would be visible through aerial surveillance, not only from OSC monitors who aren't there anymore. Is there no aerial surveillance information concerning the movement of the large masses of refugees?
Christopher, I don't have it at the moment, but again, this is an evolving situation, and as soon as we have something, we'll share it with you on that. Pavel Buda, please. Pavel, you've been waiting for a long time. Excuse me. Go ahead now, please.
No problem. Czech TV, I have a question for both of you, gentlemen. First, Air Commodore. NATO met so far more or less no resistance of Yugoslavian army. Do you think it's a kind of aftershock, or do you expect them just only to wait with their counterattack just for any later stage of operation? And to Jamie, I have a question concerning the Russians. Moscow has announced today that the S4 units are no more under the command chain of NATO. How far it can affect or even endanger the S4 operation itself? Thank you.
But let me pick up the first part of that one, and I think I addressed this yesterday, really, but I'll try and make it clearer to you. They're trying very hard to get at us, but you will have seen, I know Mark wonders about the numbers of aircraft we have involved. We have a well-rehearsed, well-practiced way of going into these operations with great support, great electronic warfare, and a lot of sophisticated systems on our side. All those and the tactics that we use are designed to frustrate and confuse the enemy air defenses. And I think to a great extent that is working. I'm sure that as soon as they manage to find their solutions, they will and continue to try and take us out.
Pavel, on the question about Russian participation in S4, like you, I think I've seen the Wire Agency report from Moscow reporting that. I'm not sure if that has been communicated formally to Sakar, the overall commander, yet. As you know, Russia has its own separate chain of command under Sakar for its participation in the S4 mission. But this is a NATO-led operation. That has been clear to everybody from the very beginning, and everybody has agreed to participate on the basis of accepting a NATO-led operation. Russia has a special arrangement, but still under the general principle of a NATO-led operation. So we'll be seeking to clarify that with Russia, but I make the point that those forces that participate in S4 must accept the principle of a NATO-led operation. But again, that is something we may have some more on for you tomorrow. Gentleman there, please.
Paul Smith from the Danish Broadcasting. Jamie, can you tell me what is the exact warning to Milosevic if he violate the airspace of Bosnia anymore, if there will be more incidents inside Albania, or if he crosses into Macedonia after the strong military build-up near the border?
Well, although I'm a spokesman, I've always believed in the principle that actions speak louder than words. And I hope yesterday's action over Bosnia is a clear indication of what will happen if President Milosevic tries to extend the conflict beyond the confines of Kosovo itself. I think that would be an extremely unwise, I would even say foolhardy thing to do. And as I mentioned earlier, NATO forces, both in Bosnia and in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, are fully ready to take what measures are necessary to protect themselves. I think it would be foolhardy. I don't believe it's in the interest of President Milosevic to try to do that. I think it would bring even stronger international condemnation than the already considerable condemnation that Belgrade is facing at the present time. Yes.
Great talk on Fox News. You keep saying that the attacks by the Serb forces in Kosovo against the ethnic Albanians are not related to the NATO action, but clearly there's been an upsurge in the last few days since NATO has started its action. Are you surprised at this? Wasn't there some anticipation that this kind of thing had been happening? Certainly there was a lot of discussion in the press prior to the attacks, and wasn't there any kind of plan, any kind of contingency plan to anticipate this?
Okay, Greg, can I answer the question this way? Imagine that today there was no NATO action at all over Kosovo. What do you think would be the situation on the ground in Kosovo today? Do you think the Yugoslav forces would be back in their barracks and complying with the promises that Milosevic made last October? Do you think that the Kosovar Albanian population would be living in safe conditions? Personally, I don't believe they would be, quite frankly. Is there any evidence from President Milosevic's behaviour in Kosovo since last March that he exercises restraint, that he stops the killing simply because the international community does nothing to stop it? I think we've got a year's evidence that is not the case, that Milosevic does not exercise restraint in Kosovo. I agree with you entirely, and this is a matter of genuine and deep concern in this alliance, that the situation in Kosovo today is probably an extremely black one indeed. But let's be honest, the only way we're going to stop this, even if it cannot be done, unfortunately, in 24 hours, is through decisive action by the international community. And if we weren't doing this, I guarantee you that people would still be dying in Kosovo today. But at least we're offering some kind of perspective, no matter how difficult, that won't go on for much longer. And that's why we have to see this through to the end until we've achieved that objective. So.
Mr. Johnson, Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. Regarding the situation today, since KLA and the NATO obviously have the common enemy today, are there any kind of cooperation, communication between the KLA? And the second question is, what is the situation for the KLA at this moment? Well, are they still a force there?
Well, I imagine the situation for the KLA is probably a very difficult one, because, as I mentioned, they're being attacked in their strongholds. And, of course, they do not have the heavy weapons, the tanks, the armour that the Yugoslavs have. But we have to recognise a very important fact. The Kosovar Albanians, including KLA representatives, have signed, in toto, with no qualification, the Rambouillet peace agreement. They have accepted it in full. And I also saw yesterday statements by KLA commanders that they will not provoke the Serbs, which of course is something that we've always called upon them to do, to be part of the solution and not part of the problem by restraining from provocative acts. So I believe, again, that the responsibility for what is happening at the moment in Kosovo is clearly on one side. We don't have any contact with them directly. Let's go to a few more questions. The gentleman on the end there. Gentleman on the end, please.
Donc, italien. Je viens de la région des Pouilles, qui est en face du Kosovo, Macédoine, etc. Pouvez-vous confirmer pourquoi les aéroports civils ont été arrêtés, fermés jusqu'au mois d'août? Première question. Deuxième question. Dans le Parlement italien, hier, on a parlé des missiles serbes qui étaient en direction des Pouilles et qui ont été abattus. Vous pouvez confirmer ça?
First of all, sir, as regards your first question about the airports, when we started, because of the suddenness of our operation, we had to take over the airspace quite quickly. Since then, arrangements have been made, and all the civilian airports are now operating at reduced times and in association with our command and control. So the airports are starting to work again, although I expect there are some frustrations. As to your second question about missiles going towards Italy, I have absolutely no information at all. But what I would say, as what I briefed to you today, that you've got to be very careful that this is a very strong and sophisticated propaganda campaign. And many of the questions that you raise in this room today are a result of that campaign, where we question each other very hard, and sometimes our actions are questioned. So you have to be very careful to make sure of your facts before you go forward.
Okay, we'll take a few more questions before we'll get to the Air Commodore's video clip. So I'll take a question there, please. Sir.
Yes, Enrico Brivio from Il Sole 24 Ore. I have two questions. The first is that the Italian Minister of Interior today said that Italian ships are ready in case there would be need of a humanitarian rescue of Albanian refugee. I would like to know how likely do you consider this option? And the second question is, do you have any indication from your intelligence that the Serb forces, apart from the attack of the two aircraft that were shot in Bosnia, they have any other intention to expand the territory of war outside Serbia and Kosovo?
Well, if I could take at least the first question, perhaps David will take the second. As you know, NATO is not an organization which specializes in refugee questions. The UNHCR is clearly in the lead there, but you may have heard of our Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center, which is here at NATO headquarters. That has been activated for some time now to coordinate NATO's assistance to the UNHCR in terms of dealing with refugees if the UNHCR needs our help, for example, in terms of logistics, transport, and whatever. So we are completely ready to help, and I note what you said of the Italian government's decision, which of course in that respect is very helpful indeed. David, do you want to comment on the second aspect?
I think the contingency plans are always prudent to have up your sleeve, and I'm sure the offer of vessels is very, very useful. The second question?
On the intelligence of any more Serb plans to...
We have no intelligence of their plans, but I think we would, from yesterday's actions, we would welcome more excursions into our airspace.
Thank you, sir.
Targets were struck last night. And as I briefed before, in the region of Belgrade, Niš, and targets in Kosovo. Okay? This was a pictorial representation of the air-to-air engagement which occurred. Once again, I seem to be apologizing all the time, but those transport aircraft are, of course, the latest swept-wing fighter aircraft. Our two aircraft in blue were on their standard combat air patrol over the MND North sector in S4, and they were advised of two hostile contacts which were operating out to the east. Yes, please. They turned as part of their normal cap, and as they turned to a westerly direction, the hostiles turned towards them, threatening them and violating Bosnian airspace. At that stage, the aircraft did, as I said before, conducted a standard countermeasure, turned in towards their targets and put out a copybook interception and launched their missiles, shooting down both the aircraft. Some stills of some of the targets that we've attacked over the last couple of days. This is as you can see, the Yakova SAM site before destruction, and you will have to look carefully to notice where the destruction is. And let's have a look at the other one, please. And you'll see a large black hole where the low-blow radar associated with that system was. Thank you. Next one. You've heard this and you've seen this come up quite regularly over the last couple of days. Machinika airfield before, and yes, please. The aircraft taken out afterwards. Thank you. We should now have some film from the aircraft.
these clips will be available to you afterwards.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that gives you an idea of the technology that goes in. And whilst I must apologize for the problems that we had to start off with, to get that sort of technology, that sort of battle damage assessment as quickly as we can, and in the form that it is, for you all to see, is a monumental piece of progress. I can assure you that it takes the highest technology to be able to bring that sort of information into this audience in the time that it's taken.
Here's our program lineup. In a moment, a profile of Yugoslavia leader Slobodan Milosevic. Today,
University here in Washington, D.C. Good morning. Thanks very much for being with us. Good morning. Parents allegedly or reportedly committed suicide. His wife is from Russia. He is a person who has been often called the butcher of the Balkans, and he is compared to being the arsonist and the firefighter at the same time. Are these fair descriptions of Mr. Milosevic?
That seems apt, and it really is remarkable that we've made the transition in just a few years from the peacemaker of the Dayton Accords to the butcher of Belgrade, to a thug. He's also been likened to a mafia don.
What do you know about him?
Well, he's really a fascinating individual, and one of the most important things to emphasize is that this is not a man who had this charismatic fire from early on in his career. There was a transformational event for him that occurred in 1987. Kosovo, I think it's really important to emphasize, is not Bosnia. Unlike Bosnia, where, after all, we should recall, it was some 2.5 weeks of sustained bombing before he yielded. Kosovo is actually sacred, hallowed ground for the Serbs. It was the site of the Battle of Kosovo Polja in 1389, where the Serbs battled and lost to the Ottoman infidel, as they called their enemy. And it was in Kosovo that he was called to quell the riots in 1987, but he did not quell them. Rather, he gave voice to intense nationalist sentiments. He spoke of the need to protect our land, that our descendants will remember us for the stand we take to protect the sacred land of Serbia. He turned the audience on fire, and in that way really found his political voice as a fiery nationalist charismatic. This man who had really been an apparatchik before that time. And one can look at so many of the events that have occurred as going back to that quite transformational time for him. He was, in 1989, elected president, recognizing that the Communist Party was on the way out. 1989 was the 600th anniversary of that battle, and shortly after he was elected, he revoked the autonomy of Kosovo that had been granted by Tito, which had the effect of setting the stage for the tragedy we're seeing unfolding at this time.
Some personal pieces of information from Judy Keene, who has a piece this morning, page 7A of USA Today, if you have access to that newspaper. He spends most of his time in the Grand Palace in Belgrade's outskirts, once occupied by Yugoslav leader Joseph Tito. His wife is a Marxist. The two met in high school. She is a committed communist and a potent behind-the-scenes influence. They have 2 children. He is a compact man with a wary smile and steely eyes who usually offers guests cigars and plum brandy. When he chooses, he speaks adequate English, learned during his frequent visits to New York City when he was a director of a state-run bank. Following Tito's death, as you pointed out, in 1980, he became a Communist Party leader and built his power through intense nationalism. And he is described by some, including former Senator Bob Dole, as an arrogant, selfish, power-hungry dictator. He's also described as a cunning, shrewd political figure, a tough cookie, according to a former State Department official who has met him and worked with him over the years.
Yeah, former Ambassador Warren Zimmerman called him the slickest con man in the Balkans, but someone who can be quite charming indeed. He charms many people at first meeting, but he has really steely resolve. You spoke of his wife, a very interesting woman in her own right, the daughter of two resistance fighters during World War II. Her mother reportedly in the forest during the resistance paused for a day to give birth to her, and then went back to her resistance activities. Only a few years later was taken prisoner by the Germans and executed. So she really grew up without her parents at all. Milosevic had the two suicides of his family, so they're both really wounded people at one level and found each other in some important ways. She's been likened to the Eva Peron of her country. An analogy I find interesting to consider is that of the Ceausescus of Romania, who were really hallowed and idolized by the Romanian people as they were plundering the country, and ultimately destroyed as the Romanian people awakened to how much damage they had caused.
What do you know of Yugoslavia, the country, the languages that they speak there, the political and geographic terrain of the country?
Well, it's a fascinating country with a long tradition of ethnic conflict, yet this tradition was in many ways stilled under the leadership of Tito. We had in Sarajevo a wonderful multi-ethnic tapestry, and people were marrying across ethnic lines. Yet the seeds of that tension always remained, and it was that potential for fanning ethnic hatred that Milosevic seized upon, leading to the ethnic cleansing during the tragic war.
Does the U.S. and NATO have a role in all of this?
I believe they very much do have a role in all of this. He, of course, asserts you are interfering in the sovereign affairs of my nation. This is the heartland of my nation. Increasingly, beyond just international conflicts, I believe the international community, and this is represented by the finding in the Pinochet case in Chile, has a role in terms of human rights, and there were dreadful abuses of human rights going on in Kosovo.
Our guest is a graduate of Yale. He teaches at George Washington University, and he is a political psychologist, the author of a number of editorial pieces, including a new one that is coming out soon to newspapers around the country. We'll get a call from Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Appreciate C-SPAN.
We appreciate your call.
I'm a little bit suspicious of Mr. Clinton's policies in that area of the world. It seems that these people have been fighting each other since the 1300s, and this gentleman that we're talking about back in Dayton Accord days was looked upon as somewhat of a peacemaker and a good fella. Now he's being compared with Hitler. Of course, comparing him with Hitler is kind of like comparing Bill Clinton with Churchill. It's not a very valid comparison. It appears to me that this is just another one of Bill Clinton's wag the dog procedures. You remember back whenever he was accused of rape about 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden Hillary started running for Senate in New York. And this wiped that story off the news. Now we're getting some news, and have been getting quite a bit of news about Clinton's selling this country out to the communist Chinese. And all of a sudden we start attacking Kosovo and Belgrade. Now these people have been killing each other over there ever since the 1300s.
Thanks for the call. Dr. Post?
Well, without getting into a discussion of President Clinton, this is not a sole United States action. This is a long and, in fact, overdue, in my judgment, NATO response to a major violation by a nation in a region which has really major possibilities for spreading and involving us further. So I think it's a highly appropriate, indeed overdue, intervention.
We're looking for analogies in an area that many people have not focused on, or up until a few days ago may not have known where it is on the map. How would you compare it to something that could happen in this country, or may have happened in our history?
Well,
is there a comparison?
I don't really see an apt comparison. I'm really struck by the analogy, to leap back overseas, if I may, with Iraq, where we had a very similar situation, a leader who only understands the language of force, and where consistent resolve has been and is necessary to demonstrate that words and guile alone will not work, and it's necessary to comply with international policies.
Our guest has also written a number of books, and he is the co-founder of the George Washington Institute for Crisis and Disaster Management. We'll get a call from Queens, New York for Jerrold Post. Good morning.
Hello?
Good morning.
Hi.
Caller, I'm going to ask you to, hold on, I'm just going to ask you to turn the volume down so that we can eliminate the echo and you'll come through a lot better. Go ahead.
Hello. I'm Sir from the New York. I'm a
caller, let me turn down the volume. Mute the volume on your TV. Just talk to us on the phone.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Sir from the Bosnia, and I want to say that Milosevic is not Hitler. He is the Serb representative. He is our president, and he can do nothing if the Serb people is not let him know, let him to do something, you know, what he can sell our land. The Kosovo is the Serbian land. If not, his president Milosevic and Serb and Bosnia is never be over there.
Well, I think you're
over there in a Dayton. He make the peace. If he don't make it, that we don't be over there in Bosnia. And as Serb in Kosovo, he lives over there 100 years, you know. And 1389, the Serbs is not have a fight with the Albanians, it's have a fight with the Turkish, okay? And over there in America, I can come if I don't have a paper. But the people from the Albania come in Kosovo, and he don't want to take a Yugoslavian, you know, citizenship. He don't want to pay the tax over there. He don't want to pay the nothing. He make it only kids, 10, 15 kids, and now it's 9 and 1, you know, 9 Albanian and 1 Serbian. What is the Serbian from the when he's going from over there and sell the land and go?
Well, you're speaking about the complexity of the political environment and also the complexity of his political origins. I think it's important to emphasize when you observe this isn't just him, it is the Serbian people, that these are deeply felt sentiments within the Serbian people that he has been articulating and indeed fanning the flames of. In fact, I would suggest that his intransigence against this massive air campaign will, at least in the short run, not only not weaken Milosevic, which is the intent, but in fact will strengthen him politically. He's had some very difficult times politically, but at this point he is speaking to almost a mythic power in the Serbian people, and I believe he will be given, at least in the short run, heroic stature for the role he is playing.
From the Associated Press, ethnic Albanians speak an Indo-European language, Serbs a Slavic one. Most ethnic Albanians are Muslims. Serbs are staunchly Orthodox. Today, ethnic Albanians account for an estimated 90% of Kosovo's 2 million people. It's a sharp increase since the end of World War II, when Serbs made up about 50%. Kosovo was the heartland of the old Serb kingdom, which reached its height in the 14th century. In 1389, as you pointed out, the Ottoman Turks defeated the Serbs, and in the decades afterwards brought Kosovo under their control. The Serbs regained Kosovo in 1912 during the First Balkan War, when Serbia, Montenegro, Greece, and Bulgaria defeated the Ottoman Turks and ended more than 500 years of Turkish domination.
And I think it's important to note, well, 600 years ago, that battle, it's like today. the past is present in this region, and these themes that resonate call up the sense of battle, of toughness in the Serbian people. We will not yield to the outsider invader. And while 90% of Albania does represent, Kosovo does represent the Albanian Kosovars, in fact, it is cherished ground to the Serbians, ground they will never yield.
Our guest has testified on this issue on Capitol Hill. He's Jerrold Post of George Washington University. Will be with us for another 40 minutes as we continue with your phone calls. Capitol Heights, Maryland, good morning on our Liberal line.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I'm just want to make a point. They keep on saying that they're trying to eliminate Milosevic and his armed forces, while the Serb people themselves, the civilians, are saying they ain't giving up and they're willing to fight because this is sacred land. Then how could you tell me that I would have to sign a piece of paper to agree to give away my secret land with national monuments that means something to me? I just want him to answer that for me, please.
Sure. Thanks for the call.
Well, I think you're raising an important point, and a point indeed that both Milosevic and his key diplomats have raised too. After all, to speak analogously, when Russia rather brutally attacked Chechnya, we did not intervene. When Mexico quelled the violent revolt in Chiapas of the Zapatistas, we did not intervene. Why are we intervening here? Is the question you are really raising. But it is not a matter of giving up Serbian land. It is a matter of restoring the autonomy of their almost entirely Albanian Kosovar population. And there's a big difference between autonomy and secession in a separate nation. That is the fear, of course, of the Serbs that has been fanned by Milosevic. But there's an analogy perhaps to Spain, where one has an autonomous region in the Basque region of Spain, but it is nevertheless a coherent part of Spain.
What is President Milosevic's religion? Do you know?
Yes, he's Orthodox. In fact, his father was an Orthodox priest who separated from his mother shortly after the birth of Milosevic.
How many languages do they speak in this area?
Well, it's a polyglot region, and in fact, part of some of the earlier ethnic tensions had to do with striving for regions based on not only ethnic but linguistic purity. Yet I think it's important to emphasize, people have, one of the callers earlier spoke about the fact that they've been fighting for 600 years, why don't we just sort of let them continue fighting, that in fact they haven't been fighting for 600 years. It is not a requirement that when there is ethnic divisiveness that there be conflict, and there had been substantial progress towards ameliorating the ethnic conflict until he revoked the autonomy of Kosovo and brutally fanned the flames of ethnic cleansing.
On our conservative line, Double Springs, Alabama. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be on C-SPAN, and thanks for the opportunity to speak and voice my opinions.
Thank you.
I have a few points to make. At first, when I started listening to the profile of Slobodan Milosevic, I noticed the eerie parallel between some of the things that you mentioned and our president. Now, I support the troops, and I support some kind of action having to be done over there. It's kind of a tricky situation, though, when you have a president. And I harken back to the interview that Barbara Walters had with Miss Lewinsky, and there was a point that I've heard none of the press bring out when she asked her, paraphrasing, did her and the president, did he ever show his feelings? Did he have a tender moment with her? And Lewinsky said, yeah, at the point where the first soldier died over in Bosnia. And then I started thinking that was an ideal opportunity for Mrs. Walters to ask her about the report that, to put it cleanly, she was servicing the president while he was talking to a congressman about sending our troops over to Bosnia. Now, the concern that I have, I want to believe in the president. I want to have the utmost respect and trust in him. But when he's doing something like that, sending people over to possibly die, and at the same time doing something like that, it's unthinkable that the American people would tolerate that. And as far as our troops in Bosnia, what's going to happen with those guys?
Okay.
They're on the ground now.
Thanks, caller. Dr. Jerrold Post.
Well, we are not talking about a decision only by President Clinton. I understand the reservations you've given voice to, and those are have been expressed by a number of Americans. At the same time, as the only superpower, we have an important obligation, an important sense of responsibility, and this decision was carefully thought out, worked out with our diplomats, with the Department of Defense. We have an excellent national security policy team, and they have been debating, attempting to solve this diplomatically, which Milosevic has made impossible. It is very important to maintain our credibility, not just our individual credibility, but that of NATO as well. And to not follow through in this way would have been to have made a mockery of the alliance. So this is not a matter of Clinton sending troops into battle. It's a matter of national decision and of national policy, and I believe Clinton's leadership indeed has been effective in this matter, and he's following through in a way that he must.
There is a 6-hour time difference between Washington and Belgrade. We're told from the Associated Press that another round of bombing expected this evening. Also reports that as many as 10 people have died in the first airwave attacks. 38 others have been wounded. And of course, it's now mid-afternoon over there, and a look at the damage assessments are now well underway, both on the ground and through satellite. What do you take of the first day of attacks?
Well, I was impressed by the breadth of the attack, which, in fact, in contrast to some of the early suggestion would be only at air defense targets, was quite a bit broader. There have indeed been casualties in Belgrade as well, the capital of Yugoslavia. And as our defense authorities have been attempting to share with the American public, because of the capacities of the very tough Serbian forces, who have now, as you know, declared war. They saw this as an act of war. It is certainly a significant possibility there will be American loss of life. We have had, going back several conflicts, and going back to Vietnam, a notion of being able to be demonstrating strength on the one hand, without loss of life on the other hand. One can only remember the soldier being dragged through the street in Somalia and that turning U.S. policy around rather quickly as U.S. public support rapidly waned. And I think it's really very important for us to understand that going along with the responsibility for exercising leadership in the free world is the possibility, indeed probability, that some of our brave young men and women will die in combat.
Mobile, Alabama is next. Good morning.
Good morning. The black helicopters are flying down here around this hotel this morning. For Mr. Post.
What base is located near you?
There's a naval base over in Pascagoula, and then there's a Pensacola Naval Air Station, and then there's a Eglin Air Force Base over around Pensacola, somewhere over that way. I'm just in a hotel over here watching Mr. Post, and it's a good program. Take a look at your map, Mr. Post. Right below Kosovo is Macedonia. Then you got Greece, and over to the right, over towards the Dardanelles or wherever that is, you got Turkey. I would like to know, Bulgaria and those places, I would like to know how many Greek airplanes, how many Turkish airplanes, how many German airplanes, how many, what portion, what other countries besides British and the United States had airplanes bombing them. I'd like to know if Greece and Turkey, which I was stationed in both those countries, have any airplanes in those waves of assaults. I would like to know that from. And you seem like you've got a pretty good handle on this, even if the helicopters are flying down here this morning.
Thanks, caller.
Well, I don't have a handle on what the proportion is. We are taking an active role, but this certainly does represent the NATO alliance as a whole, not just the United States with British support.
According to the Washington Post, other nations, NATO countries, there are 19 countries, by the way. 3 additional countries joined NATO, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary on March the 12th. The 50th anniversary of NATO, by the way, takes place in late April with ceremonies here in Washington. According to the Associated Press, Britain, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, and Turkey are all providing military support for this NATO operation. Next call is from Beachlight, Pennsylvania, on our Liberal line. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing today?
Fine, thank you.
I just wanted your guests to confirm what I believe to be true. Wasn't Milosevic declared a war criminal by The Hague in the Netherlands?
No, and many of us believe that's unfortunate. In fact, in 1992, then acting Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleberger, who had been ambassador to Yugoslavia, indicated his belief he should have been indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. In fact, the Commission for War Crimes in former Yugoslavia has not indicted him, and I think that's unfortunate because, in fact, it would have significantly weakened his stature. There have been criminals, war criminals indicted, Radovan Karadzic, General Mladic. These are both his creatures in many ways, and yet he was the peacemaker while they were indicted war criminals. So this is something that should be done, but has not been done, and it has yet to be done.
San Diego is next. Good morning on our conservative line.
Yes, a local talk show host has said this KLA, this army that's in Albania, is being funded by Iran, and bin Laden is associated with it. And so I'm just concerned, and of course I'm very troubled by the atrocities overnight against the ethnic Albanians. I think we will have to get ground troops in there, but I'm just concerned about, are we setting up a country that's going to be like Iran, or a fundamentalist Muslim state? I mean, do they want autonomy like that? Is that what we're setting up here?
Thanks, caller.
I have been following closely bin Laden and his multinational organization. I am not aware of funding of the KLA by bin Laden, and see it really much more as a group striving for autonomy than part of a greater fundamentalist Islamic republic.
In a brief statement to his country, President Slobodan Milosevic spoke to his people at his palace in Belgrade, or just outside of Belgrade, Yugoslavia. When you look at him in this piece of video that we can now show our television audience, what do you see? What can you tell us about him?
Well, his persona has been described by a number of people as being remarkably calm. This is not an excitable man, yet this sense of calm and repose we see on the video belies his capacity to really rise to fiery heights. There is a sense of containment that is being conveyed, too, that this man has under control not only his own feelings, but the situation. And this is part of what shapes his ability at this time of crisis to have people repose their faith in him. When I say at this time of crisis, it is, of course, a crisis he has created. And on the one hand, his primary goal is that of survival. One of the ways he survives is by eliminating his opposition. The 1996 several months of major political protests, which he survived, were precipitated by them stealing an election. This crisis he has created, but one of the ways of getting into an us-them situation is to have an outside adversary which comes at you, and then you're able to unify your people against that outside adversary.
Is there anything that you can take away from his name, the Slobodan Milosevic? I mean, is there, for those who aren't familiar with Yugoslavia and his background, is that a common name over there? Uncommon?
No observation on that to make.
Reston, Virginia, good morning. Hello, you're on C-SPAN.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, my name is John. I'm calling for Reston.
John, do me a favor. Mute your audio so we can hear you, and that will eliminate the echo.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I support what the troop United States is involved to make a peace, but my concern is when looking at the future of the Serbs and all this stuff, if Turkey doesn't get involved, believe me, well, we find some news before. Sometimes my blood is half Italian, and I find some Hungary when the United States support NATO is involved. And the first step will be after Serb finished, you can find out between Romania, Hungary, and Poland, Czech, be big fight. And if you think it's the best way from NATO Turkey to move out, that is my concept.
Thanks, caller. Let me pick up on the comment from that caller based on this email from a viewer who says, your guest seems to be on the side of the administration. That's okay. Please ask him how he can justify the bombing without a UN resolution.
Well, that's been a complicated issue. The UN has not, it should be noted, opposed this. Indeed, Kofi Annan has played an active role in terms of trying to bring about a peaceful resolution. It would not be surprising, and part of the reason that Primakov has played an active vocal role. I would not be surprised if down the road, after a sustained period of defiance, to see a possible way out being offered by calling upon an international mediator of the likes of Kofi Annan himself, the Secretary General of the UN, perhaps a man of the stature of former President Jimmy Carter, or a Primakov, who is a close friend of the Serbians and who would dearly love to become involved and play a peacemaking role.
Birmingham, Alabama. Good morning for Dr. Jerrold Post of George Washington University. Hello, good morning, caller. Try one more time, Birmingham, Alabama.
Good morning, and I would like first to thank you for letting me talk with you. I do have one question for your guest, but before that, I would just like to say something about this comparison which was made yesterday between Serbia and the Holocaust. And I would just like to express my feelings of a deep insult which was directed toward the Serbian and Jewish people. I'm a Jewish person, and it happened that I lost all my family in the Holocaust. I never met my grandparents, and the only surviving member was my father. And I just wanted to say that the Serbs were also the part in the Holocaust which were suffering and was slaughtered during the Second World War. The reason I'm bringing this up is because Milosevic is now being compared with Hitler. I would like also to say that President Milosevic is one of the reasons I'm not in Serbia right now, and I'm completely politically against him. And I agree that he is one of the worst dictators. But the question directly that I would like to ask is, you say everybody's talking here, this is the war against Milosevic, and this is directed to punish him. And we are trying to avoid the civilian casualties, and this is not directed against the Serbian nation and Serbian people there. The question is, how would your guest, and you personally, as a person, not a political or a television figure, feel if the bombs would be falling down on your heads with an explanation that this is directed towards your president?
Well, that puts it very personally indeed, doesn't it? I still vividly remember the occasion on the dedication of the Holocaust Museum here in Washington, when Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and vivid chronicler of the Holocaust, turned and looked directly at President Clinton and referred to Bosnia and said, we must not let this happen again. We must not have a Holocaust again. And to have that dreadful spectacle of ethnic cleansing which Milosevic helped unleash in the earlier war is really a crime against humanity, which is unforgivable. Having said that, how does one coerce an individual, a leadership group, who is conducting a conflict where there is major violation of human rights? And at times it calls for force, and at times in calling for that force there will be casualties. The goal is not to inflict casualties upon Serbia. The goal is to get Milosevic to stop the slaughter in Kosovo and to agree to accepting the UN peacekeeping force. The goal is one of in these areas, and ultimately perhaps to weaken his military machine if he cannot do that. But this is an example of coercive diplomacy, and it is something he will stand up to, in my judgment, for a significant period of time, which means he is the one responsible for inflicting bloodshed upon his people.
As the developments continue to unfold, the Associated Press is also reporting this morning that all foreign journalists have been expelled or will be expelled from Yugoslavia. In a statement that the Associated Press is now reporting from Yugoslav leaders, journalists of the foreign public media from the countries that took part or allowed their territories to be used in the NATO aggression will be expelled immediately. A number of them are being held or have been held for the last couple of hours and will be escorted away from the Yugoslav borders.
His role towards the media has been interesting. This is a very shrewd controller of the communication media. He shut down, one of the first things he did yesterday was shut down the only independent radio station. He shut off the transmitter back to Europe to inhibit the sending of news worldwide. He has blocked really his people from hearing contrasting news reports. So he has significant control over what they are hearing, and his ability to put the spin on this as a courageous protector of Serbian rights rather than as the perpetrator of violence in Kosovo has been sustained through this careful manipulation of the media.
Can they get email or the internet in Yugoslavia?
Well, one of the major changes in Israel with the communications revolution, and China as well, is there's no such thing now as a totally isolated community. And indeed, faxes come in, email comes in, but he has substantially muted the opportunity to hear outside media.
We are spending this hour this morning with Jerrold Post, who's the author of a number of books. He teaches at George Washington University, and among two of the books, When Illness Strikes the Leader and Political Paranoia. He's a graduate of Yale and is the co-founder of the Institute for Crisis and Disaster Management at GW here in Washington, D.C. Annandale, Virginia is next. Good morning.
Good morning. My question revolves around Mr. Post's allegation, or maybe not an allegation, but his statement earlier that Mr. President Milosevic should be tried as a war criminal. Now, I don't have a problem with that, except that there are plenty other leaders worldwide that could be tried in the same manner, i.e. the Chinese with their Tibetan problems, and the Rwandans could have that same problem. So I would appreciate an answer to why we pick out only leaders that we think we can control. And secondly, the implications of Mr. President Milosevic declaring a state of war. Because now it appears to me that once a nation declares war on another nation, the United States doesn't have to declare war on Yugoslavia anymore. A state of war exists.
Okay, thanks, caller. And in fairness to our guest, I'm not sure if he heard your entire statement, but did you get a general sense of his questions?
Well, I heard the question being raised about my statement in terms of Milosevic not being indicted as a war criminal, and that he should be. To be leveling the finger of responsibility at individuals below the architect of the Holocaust in that troubled area, and to have accorded at one point the status of peacemaker to Milosevic was just a travesty in my judgment. And he assuredly holds a major responsibility for the violence that was carried out in that area. And I think it would be entirely appropriate, not only to them, but indeed inappropriate not to have him among those labeled as war criminals.
Sierra Vista, Arizona is next. Good morning on our moderate line.
Good morning, sir. My question was, how determined is NATO or United States to bring down President Milosevic? And if not, if they don't bring him down, like I said, he's going to come out as a hero out of his war, the man that challenged the big NATO or USA for that matter. And then if he goes down, if another nationalist Serb president would come up and with the old rusty argument of, well, we have been here since 1800 or 1300, whatever that is, what's going to happen further with this Kosovo situation?
Well, I think you're raising a couple of interesting points in that question. One, there's no guarantee that the disappearance of Milosevic from office will lead to the end of problems in that area. In fact, there are individuals even more brutally and more brutal and more nationalistic than he. In the long run, it's only the creation of genuine democratic institutions and a beginning of the healing of the wounds of this recent conflict which will permit democracy and harmony to come to that area. Having said that, the period of heroism is often replaced by a loss of confidence. This has happened in a number of countries where the individual who defiantly stood up to the international community may have temporarily won plaudits from some of his people, but to the degree that they awakened to the damage he did to their country, that can be quickly replaced. And in fact, Serbia is in economic and social tatters as a consequence of Milosevic's leadership, while the rest of Eastern Europe, for the most part, has gone on in rather healthier directions. He is responsible for this, and he is using ethnic hatred as a way of covering up his leadership inadequacies, and has stolen elections. I might note he's purged top generals. He's purged the chief of his security force, who know all too well many of the secrets of these recent years. There is a trail of murders of politically prominent individuals connected to Milosevic, which has led many to question what that represents. So there's a very uncomfortable aura about the dark and labyrinthine politics of Serbia.
And if you've just joined us, Jerrold Post has done psychological profiles on a number of leaders, including Slobodan Milosevic. According to USA Today, he was born in central Serbia. His father was a theologian, his mother a teacher. Both reportedly committed suicide. He rose to power following Tito's death in 1980. And as we've said earlier, he has two children. One, a daughter who runs a radio station and a TV station that plays videotape, that plays video music like MTV, and a son who, according to Judy Keene in USA Today, owns a disco and drives fast sports cars. Do you know anything else about them?
Well, the son is indeed considered a failed race car driver, 23 years old. He's now totaled 19 cars. Milosevic's wife reportedly adores her son, whom she calls, quotes, a wild Mustang, which I find rather interesting, but there's a streak of wildness in him.
Bridgeport, Connecticut is next. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I would like to ask Mr. Post about Milosevic. Do you think Russia support Mr. Milosevic because Russia own got history of killing his own people? See what happened in Chechnya. They create war in Nagorno-Karabakh, as you know. They got history of killing his own people. I don't think they worry about Serbian or somebody else. They better take care of his own people. And if they can support Clinton, they better sit back and keep silence?
Well, there are a couple of aspects about Russia worth observing. One, there is a long, close, traditional relationship between Russia and Serbia. But one would certainly conjecture that part of the concern over the intervention in Serbia has to do with the belief that a nation should be able to solve its own internal problems. And as I noted earlier, there was a rather major and rather brutal intervention with the Chechnya rebels within Russia. And one can imagine the Russians rather defensive and needing to insist on the right of sovereign nations to preserve their own integrity.
Good morning, Pompano Beach, Florida.
Hello, I'd just like to ask about the inconsistency of saving lives by our going in there and having the bombing killing innocent lives too. I just don't understand. If we have less lives killed by our bombings than we do from Mr. Milosevic's methods, is that a victory?
Well, you're talking about one of the unfortunate consequences of being forced to go into conflict. Let us not forget some 40,000 Albanians casualties have now occurred in that rather brutal incursion by Milosevic against what are ultimately his own citizens. So that some casualties necessarily have occurred now is a consequence of Milosevic not agreeing to a standstill in the conflict, not agreeing to stop his own inflicting of casualties, not agreeing to have peacekeepers there to ensure that casualties don't occur. So this is not a consequence of the air raids. It's a consequence of Milosevic's intransigence.
As a result of those air raids, this is the picture, front page of the Baltimore Sun. Pristina, which is the capital of Kosovo, has a Yugoslav army barracks which burns as a result of NATO forces moving into that area. And also the front page of the Christian Science Monitor has a picture of a number of folks in Belgrade lining up in a supermarket to buy necessities as a state of emergency is declared throughout Yugoslavia. Belmar, New Jersey is next for Jerrold Post of George Washington University. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to ask a couple of different questions, actually. First of all, how do the Israelis feel about what we're doing in Yugoslavia? And also, I was wondering how much it costs to fly the B-2 bomber from Missouri to its target and back just to carry one 1,000-pound bomb. Sounds more like a publicity stunt than an actual functioning weapon system.
Thanks, caller.
I don't really have information on either of those points.
Frederick, Maryland, good morning on our Liberal line.
Yeah, I think that the American administration needs to start telling the people the truth about the KLA. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has regarded them as terrorists and drug smugglers. I have a perfect quote from them. Turkish drug trafficking groups are using Albanians as elements of their criminal groups from Kosovo to sell and distribute their heroin. These groups are believed to be a part of the financial arm of the KLA's war against Serbia. These Kosovars are financing their war through the KLA's war against Serbia and through weapons trafficking and the trafficking of drugs and other illegal goods. Now, they need to start telling the truth about the KLA and not supporting only one side. And I would like to see the reaction from this panel right here.
Thank you.
I certainly in no way mean to imply that the KLA are innocents. I think the Kosovars have been brutalized during this conflict, but this is a very fiery, intense group, and it's been one of the dilemmas. In fact, there are no innocents in the area, and one sees what I would define almost as a competition of victimhoods between Serbs, Bosnians, and Croats. I think also one of the concerns here is that as the forces of Milosevic are seen to be weakened, it is not at all unlikely, in fact, that the Croats and Muslims would see this as an opportunity to resume conflict, breaking down the earlier accords. So we have a very complicated situation. The KLA, the adversary forces, the Serbs, all have much blood on their hands.
Pueblo, Colorado, good morning. Thanks for calling.
Good morning. I want to tell Dr. Post the profile that he gave was exactly the profile of President Clinton, of Mr. Milosevic. He said that he's very calm when he's on television. He's very calm in front of people. He, comes off very well. And then he goes and does something else. And he only does things to cover up things that he's done. So I think that the profile of both of them are the same. Thank you very much. Bye.
Next question, please.
Califon, New Jersey, good morning.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Post, it seems like you're being pretty consistent now with the next phase of the misinformation campaign, which is to demonize Mr. Milosevic like we did Ken Starr. Fact of the matter is, Mr. Post, this is not a humanitarian effort. And let's take another step here. Why don't you do a psychological profile on Bill Clinton?
Okay, we just had that question, so I'm just going to stop you there, and maybe generally you can comment about what you've been hearing in the calls this morning.
Well, clearly the recent political crisis in this country has diminished the confidence of portions of the American public in President Clinton's leadership. This is not a wag the dog phenomenon. This is a major required action where the U.S. properly is fulfilling its role as the only superpower. It's part of a NATO decision. This is a concerted decision between among our diplomatic and defense officials, and does not represent some particular notion of President Clinton, who I believe is exercising wise and effective leadership.
You have touched on this earlier, but what motivates President Milosevic? What drives him?
Well, that's an important question you're raising. This is not, unlike Radovan Karadzic, my psychiatric colleague who played such a dreadful role in the ethnic cleansing in Serbia. This is not an intense nationalist, nor was this an intense communist ideologue. This is very much the quintessential survivor. He found nationalism when the crowd responded so fervently to him at that remarkable speech in 1987. There was no evidence of this beforehand. So his major goal is preserving his own power, period. To do that, he plays to passions within the Serbian people. He inflames those passions, but this does not represent a deep-seated nationalistic fervor of his own.
Chicago, good morning, for Dr. Jerrold Post of George Washington University.
Good morning. I have just one question that I would like to ask. If Milosevic has been treated as a war criminal throughout this whole process because of the way that you said he's been treating other people, he's been attacking other countries, as much as I know, I'm a Serbian American that's been living here for 20-some years. Our history shows that Serbian people had never attacked anybody. They're merely trying to protect the land where the Serbian people originally started growing into the Yugoslavia. They united all the republics to create one strong country under Tito, as you're all familiar with the whole history. But just one comparison. How would Mr. Clinton be treated if in this country Cubans decide that Florida should become their country or their anatomy?
Thanks, caller.
Would you treat him the same way as...
I'm going to let you go because we're short on time. We'll get a response.
Well, I'm really not going to talk about American domestic politics, but I think to say that the Serbs have attacked no one does not square with the facts. However, the sentiments being voiced do indicate something else, that a lot of the aggression in the area on each side is defensive aggression. The initial beginning of the conflict, not here, but during the unraveling in the Bosnian conflict, had to do with defensive aggression by the Serbs against a feared resumption of the Holocaust by Tudjman and the Croats, echoing back to World War II. Everyone sees themselves as a victim. It has to aggressively defend themselves against the other.
We only have about a minute left. Mobile, Alabama, if you can keep it brief, we'll let you get on the air.
Yes, thank you. I have 3 questions about Mr.
One quick question. We got to go to the House. One quick question.
Okay. Where is he located, how we can get to him, and if he were eliminated, would the fighting stop?
Thanks very much.
I don't think the question is, or the solution is just the individual elimination of Milosevic. As I mentioned, there are some more brutal people who could easily fill in behind him. The question is one, ultimately, of introducing democratic institutions and giving full voice to all of the people. And that's going to take some time, but that's the only path that can be taken.
In doing your research on President Milosevic, which one thing surprised you the most?
Well, I was particularly struck by the transformational event in 1987. A leader is not born, he is made. And this was his really first powerful contact with his people, and it fanned a flame in him when they were adulating him, cheering him, and he knows how to play to that, and that's what he's doing right now.
Where can people read your works?
Well, my book, Political Paranoias, Yale University Press, in which I indicate the manner in which the loss of enemies, which happened in the collapse of Yugoslavia, can produce intense ethnic conflict on which demagogic hate mongers like Slobodan Milosevic can really foster.
Dr. Jerrold Post, George Washington University, thank you very much for being with us.
My great pleasure.
More discussion on this